So, I have recently realized that the overwhelming majority of games that I play feel half-baked. Like, I enjoy them for their different parts individually, but as a whole, something just doesn't click. It's sort of like hot Cheetos Kraft Dinner. While I equally enjoy both of those things on their own, together, they just don't blend. Or, they do, I don't know, I haven't actually tried them, but the point is that a lot of good games today take two concepts that don't blend and kind of stick them together. Usually, the games which generate massive fan bases are games which absorb the players into its world, and make them forget its game altogether. We call this immersion. Yeah, duh. Experienced devs manage to skillfully craft and blend all the elements which make it. They design their games based on its themes and vice versa. This creates that sense of immersion in the gamer. It's a rare thing to experience, and in a world where everyone is so distracted and everything's going crazy and you gotta be connected to the web 24/7, it's kind of refreshing. These games are great. But it's much more often that we find a game which is mediocre and fails to immerse us in its world. Sure, the game might be beautiful, or might even get some of its aspects right, but it altogether fails to immerse the player, which is a result of neglecting how well its mechanics blend with its themes. The user interface in Rome Total War, which uses cool ancient depictions of units that resemble pottery, proves that even when manifested in a smaller way, it still has a huge impact on the player's overall experience. Unfortunately, this is kind of something that the gaming industry is beginning to neglect. In Total War Arena, a more recent Total War game, which is somewhat of a failure for the studio, the user interface is slick and modern, and this does not fit the time period well, and it's not really immersive. This isn't just something that Sega is doing either, it's a trend across all games. For example, Age of Empires also had an immersive UI, up until Age of Empires 4, the new one, which, again, is slick and modern. Seriously, why are they oversimplifying everything? I'm not suggesting that every single game should only strictly stick to the style of their period, but that they should use that period, and the themes that come with it, to inform the way that their game looks and feels. But it's beginning to seem more and more like games are just informed by trends rather than by their own themes. As somebody who loves ancient history, I am extremely impressed with the worlds that Ubisoft is able to create in the Assassin's Creed games. They get so many aspects right, the architecture, the blending of cultures, the countrysides. It's all very beautiful. But there's a disconnect. Just like with every other aspect of the game, Origins and Odyssey just kind of paste these cultures and time periods onto their game formats. They don't shift any of the gameplay to fit these time periods, but rather they just kind of are during that time. It's clear that in these games, it's just a bunch of different gameplay mechanics that are mixed together, which are popular with general audiences, but that don't blend, like, at all. Now, to be clear, I absolutely loved Assassin's Creed Origins, and I even platinumed the game, but I can't say that I wasn't aware of the issues. There were some glaringly obvious flaws, which were clear to me the entire time I was playing it, and which were even more clear to me when I got around to playing Odyssey. To me, it was so disappointing to see that they hadn't resolved the issues between Origins and Odyssey that I couldn't even finish the game. In fact, I think Odyssey was worse for it. It's kind of disappointing because they spend all this time in all these games exploring these different time periods and kind of trying to immerse the player, but they never really use those time periods to inform the gameplay. Except Assassin's Creed Black Flag. That was really cool. That was super tight with like the ships and shit. That was cool. I recently made a video comparing Cyberpunk 2077 to the Souls games, and while I spent most of that video tearing apart Cyberpunk and pinning ribbons to Dark Souls, I can't say that I love everything that Dark Souls does and hate everything that Cyberpunk does, but even though Dark Souls fails at some points, its failures still line up with the overall themes of the game. Even if there are parts of the game which suck, which, trust me, there are, it still manages to immerse the player and make them feel that they care about the world. Beyond all the bugs, Cyberpunk doesn't really do this. But let's just stop talking about Cyberpunk, please. Like, it's done. It's over. It's like No Man's Sky. You know, it's in the past. We can, it'll be better in like a year or something. They'll fix it. I don't know. Let's move on. Something that's discussed widely among game critics is cognitive dissonance. In games, this sort of translates to the disconnect a character has with the actions that they perform. We can relate deeply with every character in a story individually, but when the cutscenes end, or the dialogue ends, they become cold-blooded murders. It's really hard to relate with Lara Croft when she's like murdering 50 dudes between cutscenes. I think a game which tackles this really well is The Last of Us. Unlike most other story-driven games, The Last of Us doesn't really struggle with this cognitive dissonance. Yes, you do kill people, but it blends perfectly with the story. The game is about Joel, a troubled, conflicted character, helping Ellie, a similarly troubled, conflicted character, navigate a decaying world. Both Ellie and Joel never are shown to be good people, and that's not why you like them. Ellie and Joel are morally questionable people, but because you know Joel's story, you know that, despite how he acts or what he says, he cares for Ellie, like he cared for his daughter. So when you're playing the game, you don't feel like you've just murdered a bunch of innocent people because you had to get some ancient artifact or something. You feel like you've just murdered a bunch of other morally questionable people because you had to protect Ellie. This culminates in the end where Joel makes another morally questionable decision, which perfectly wraps up the story, giving a satisfying conclusion and not just a lazy happy ending. Because it would feel very awkward if Joel just killed a bunch of people and was rewarded with like a nice retirement. This is usually glossed over at its most basic level, which is, it's really hard to relate with Lara Croft when she's murdering like 50 dudes between cutscenes. But it's something we all notice when playing games, even if we don't know how to fully articulate it. But the question is, how does a game balance its immersion while making the gameplay still fun? And the answer is, for me at least, immersion should always come first. Some of the time. It's complicated, I know. But even if your game has super tight gunplay, or some really great puzzles, if I'm not invested in the world, I don't really care. Yes, there are examples of games which don't really immerse the player, but they're still super fun. I think these games should be considered exceptions and not examples. Anyways, back from that tangent, this is not just something that can be applied to characters, it's something that can be applied to every single part of the game, specifically relating to what we're talking about today, the themes. In other words, what the game is trying to say. If there's a disconnect between what you're doing and what the game is saying / wanting you to believe you're doing, then it's going to feel kind of weird. Please acknowledge the contradictive nature of what I'm about to say. Despite all that I've just stated, games should still focus on being fun. A fun game, mixed with an immersive world, is a masterpiece. But it's ultimately negative to go too hard in one direction. On one hand, you have games like the Telltale games or Heavy Rain, which might tell really great stories, but are only decent games at best. Yes, you are immersed in the story and care about the characters, but only to a certain extent, because you might not be having as much fun as you'd like to be having while playing any other game. So, it is immersive, but because the gameplay isn't very engaging, it's kinda dull. Because they focus too much on storytelling and immersion, they may end up actually failing to immerse the player at all because they're not engaged. And then, on the other hand, you have games like Call of Duty, which are not at all immersive really, but heavily focused on allowing the player to have fun. Some of the time. I think a game which might help further explain this point is Mount & Blade Warband, which, if you haven't played a Mount & Blade game yet, please go try it. It doesn't even have to be Warband. Play Bannerlord if you want better graphics, even though, you know, it's not as good as Warband, but just play it, just try it, see what you think. Anyways, Warband. Even though there are some aspects that don't blend, the aspects that do blend are the world building and the gameplay. I get so excited and immersed when hearing
your money or your life
from a Forest Bandit for the 700th time. It feels like the game world is completely real, and it's because every aspect of the game is built for the game world, and more importantly, everyone within the world believably exists within that world. Although the game isn't perfect, because of its beautiful blend of gameplay mechanics and world building, I can easily recommend it to anyone. Even though these game mechanics could technically impede on my immersion, they don't, because they allow me the freedom to engage with the world in a meaningful way. In Mount & Blade, this means traveling in a little JRPG type map on a little horse, and instead of actually walking your horse through all these lands, you're kind of just flying around them, super speed traveling. And who's to say which is better? Well, I am. I'm gonna say that the little horsey is better than having to spend all the time to move across the lands on horseback. It would just be a lot of fluff between gameplay. And the JRPG type map is fun, and it's engaging enough that I don't lose my connection to the world. Anyways, we've touched on games that use mechanics that blend with their gameplay, games that don't, and how games should balance this. But now, I want to talk about a game that I love, which is Shadow of the Colossus. I know a lot of people haven't had the chance to play this game, so let me give you a quick rundown. Spoilers ahead. You travel to a forbidden land to revive a dead princess, who you love. You're alone, with your horse, and you speak to a voice from the sky called Dorman, and it tells you to defeat these 16 colossi to revive the dead princess. Then, the game just immediately drops you in with no tutorial. The game world is vast and empty. You have no minimap, no quest icon, nothing. Just a glowy sword which points you towards the boss. Boss fights are incredibly beautiful, and each time you defeat a boss, its souls consume you and your character slowly becomes more and more corrupted and decrepit. Finally, by the end, after your horse dies and you cried for a little bit, you defeat the final boss, and you get transported back to the temple. Some monk guy and soldiers show up and they're like, "What are you doing here?" and then all the spirits of the Colossi that you killed surround you, and one of the soldiers stabs you, and you turn into a massive blob, and all the spirits you killed just come and make you one massive Colossi, and which turns out to be dormant the whole time. It was dormant, and the monks banish you, and all the spirits get sucked out of you, and you die on the floor, and then the princess wakes up. And oh look, there's your horse. What makes this game a masterpiece is that the entire time you are completely immersed in the game world. Like I said, there is nothing telling you what to do. You just know that you have to do it, because you're a gamer and you know that the Colossi are bosses, but every single time you kill a Colossi, there's a sad, sort of longing look in their eyes. And more, you, yourself, the player, realize that you feel a bit bad for murdering these massive monstrosities. The game doesn't tell you any of this, because all in all, the cutscenes are only about an hour long. It just kind of makes you feel these things through its gameplay. And that's entirely what I'm talking about. The themes of a game should inform its gameplay, and Shadow of the Colossus 100% succeeds at this. So, I was just gathering footage for Shadow of the Colossus, and I gotta say, I kind of missed a lot of the different parts that also make the game what it is based on its themes. And just playing it, I was just so immersed the whole time into the game, and that is so rare for me. It's just incredible that this game, which is just empty and open, is able to suck me in better than a game which is throwing stuff at me every 30 seconds. It's crazy, but it proves that at a fundamental level, a game which is informed by its themes can really work. If I can engage with the world I care about in a meaningful and fun way, then I can connect with it. And unfortunately, this is just something that's really hard for game studios to accomplish. It's also just something that games don't really strive to do anymore. Most games, much like in many other entertainment industries, are more focused on trends than creating a meaningful and impactful experience for the player. I don't know what I expect. I mean, like I said, this is common among all industries nowadays. Maybe it's just because I'm old enough to have watched games grow and leave their artistic experimental phase and enter their capitalist $25 for the suit of armor phase. But maybe, when something is becoming the norm, we shouldn't just accept it. My name is Jimbo, and if you like this video, I don't know, just do what you want, man. I'm gonna go try some hot Cheeto crap dinner.